Welcome to Women Waking the World presents A Conversation for a Change. I'm really pleased to have you with us today. This is our third in the series, and I want to tell you a little bit about Women Waking the World and this program. Women Waking the World is about women, about you, about for women, by women, and with women. And we really hope that you will bring your partner, the men in your life, to listen with you, because it's important, and I can guarantee you that you too will have a very nice conversation after you watch this together. So we really hope you'll do that. And the other thing I wanted to talk about today is the phrase women's issues. We hear that a lot. We kind of bundle up a whole lot of things and we throw it into that phrase, women's issues. And I want to suggest that we move away from that, because if you look at the issues we're speaking to, we're talking about equality, pay equality, we're talking about child care, we're talking about electing women, we're talking about rape, we're talking about violence against women. And the truth of it is, these are issues that are not women's issues per se. They are issues that we have to deal with, and they are perpetuated by men. I don't mean all men, and certainly not the abusers. The abusers are, I think, a small percentage of men. But we really need to have men involved. These are issues that they share with us, and we need their support to make any difference in the world. And today we're going to be talking in more depth about violence against women, about abuse, both verbal and physical abuse. And my friend today, with me today, is Gayle Guest-Brown. And Gayle is the Executive Director of DVSAC, which is Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Coalition. And she is really an expert in this. And what I find so interesting about Gayle is that she had an incredibly exciting and, I was going to say important, I don't know how important, but it was a very successful career at Hewlett-Packard for many years. And I understand during that time you were also volunteering in this area to support women. And then made this huge jump just 2 years ago to Nevada County in California here, where she's taken on the directorship, moving from profit-oriented HP to nonprofit, very nonprofit oriented.
Very nonprofit.
and bringing with her these enormous skills of strategy, of management, of her own passion and her commitment to this area that is so needed right now to come up against what we're dealing with in the world. And this is a worldwide issue, but we're going to focus in more narrowly to this county in particular and California in general. So I want to introduce my friend, and the first thing I want to ask you, as I've been coached by some of my team members here. So Gayle, the first thing we're going to ask you is, why is this a relevant subject for our viewers? There may be people out here who don't feel that violence touches their life at all, or have never had any negative experiences. Why is this information important?
You know, well, first of all, thank you for having me and giving me an opportunity to give voice to this issue, and to represent the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Coalition. We've been in the community about 35 years, and I still run into people who don't know who we are. So thank you for having me on.
Our pleasure.
So thank you very much. Why is it important? Why is this issue important for folks? Well, it may come as no surprise that 1 in 4 women will be impacted by domestic violence in her lifetime. That's a national average, but it holds pretty true for every community, because domestic violence knows no socioeconomic boundaries. So no matter what community you live in, whether it's affluent or poor or rural, it has domestic violence there. And women who give birth to this world have children. So if 1 in 4 women are impacted by domestic violence, and they have on average 2.5 kids, that's a lot of children impacted by domestic violence, right? And we know that the children that grow up in those households are impacted in a big way. 80% of boys that grow up in that household go on to abuse their spouses. And about 50% of women growing up in those households go on to be in another domestic violence household. So, and I think it's a fallacy. I think people really cannot have their eyes open if they say they're not impacted by this in their community. It is widespread. If it's not in your direct family, which is hard for me to believe with those kind of statistics, it's either your sister, your mother, your cousin, your daughter. Everybody is impacted by this. If it's not in your family, then it's the kids next door. They grow up and they date your daughter, right? And so it is a very pervasive problem. So it's important to know about it. So because I think it is a pervasive problem, but it's a problem that we can do something about. And if we create enough awareness with our young people, we can avoid these relationships. I think I could have made different choices if I had known the warning signs. And so I think it's very important to engage with our youth around this issue, because if they know the warning signs, they can recognize it earlier, right? So that's where we start with kids. I mean, the younger we get to them, to teach them about respectful relationships, mutuality, and boundaries, and respect for one another.
And bullying, even at that young age.
Anti-bullying, right? Then we can stop domestic violence. So this is not rocket science. This is all about treating each other respectfully, right?
You know, you said something to me once that was interesting to me. You referred to this as a business.
Oh,
the business of domestic violence, and I thought, wow. Now, the good news is it's being taken on as a business so that it can be dealt with with strategy and management and et cetera. On the other hand, I think it's also overwhelming to recognize it is at that level that we have to deal with it.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a whole field of domestic violence, right? And fortunately and unfortunately, because before 1994, we did not have a national means of dealing with this. It was going on. But the O.J. Simpson's case brought visibility to this big issue. And it was only then that the federal government, Joe Biden was the author of this bill, the Violence Against Women's Act.
Right.
And that put it on a national stage, gave it federal funding, and that allowed us to open centers across the country, right, to deal with this huge problem in our communities all over the country. And so this was important legislation, and it made a big difference. It's the 20th anniversary of VAWA, and it's so funny that it broke as we were getting ready to celebrate the 20th anniversary of VAWA, which, they were celebrating the fact that the Department of Justice had recently released some statistics that showed that domestic violence has decreased 67% since the 1994 to 2011, and that is significant.
Oh, really? That should put a lot of people out of business.
No, you would think, right?
I would think.
Right?
It's not.
But you know better, right?
Yeah, I do.
mean, it's
Yeah.
huge. I mean, it's a huge problem still. Just as we're celebrating this, the Ray Rice incident happens, right? And so that is both hurtful.
Right. It's the good news and the bad news.
It's bad news. But it again gives us an opportunity to talk about it. The fact that we have still a lot of work to do. When you talk to the people who work with domestic violence and in the centers, they said there's no way it's gone down 64%. But it's from their perspective. They're in the hospital dealing with the trauma, dealing with the crisis. So it doesn't feel like it's gone down because they're still seeing people, day after day after day. So I'm sure it has improved. It could not have not improved. So I'm very grateful for that statistics because it tells me that all this work is not for naught.
Yeah.
It's making a difference.
And it has such a greater influence too. It's not just about the violence or that particular situation, as you were saying. It has to do with how we're raising our children and what kind of respect we're seeding into the world itself. And it's interesting, I was thinking about all of the fact that it's kind of a quiet conversation. I mean, women who have been abused, many of them, they speak in women's circles or quietly, and they're getting help, but it's not a public conversation for them for the most part. It's humiliating, it's still very painful, etc. Men, of course, would like to think it's not their problem. And I think I probably missed that point when I was talking about women's issues. It's easy for men to dismiss women's issues, but all of a sudden it's in the newspaper, and there's suddenly a public conversation, whether it's Prince, what's his name, Prince Andrew, or Bill Cosby, or whatever. There's suddenly a conversation going on. That's new. That's relatively new, publicly.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. And all of the, when I first started this work in 1992, hardly anybody talked about domestic violence, right? I'm not 1992, when I started this work in 2002. It was still not talked about, but since then, movie stars have come forward, everybody comes forward and talks about it.
Yes, yes.
I'm a survivor as well, and so it is my life's work and my life's passion to do this work. So when I was working at HP, I did this work through my ministry at church. I went to my pastor, and my church didn't have a very good response to it when it happened to me. At that point in time, people need more than prayer. They need some really tangible resources to deal with it. And there was one associate pastor that told me, hey, you need to go get help. And I did, and at the local resource in Sacramento at the time was Weave. And I went and I got help, and it was easier for me because I didn't have children, and I made good money. That's not the case for everybody. No. Some people feel really trapped in those situations, right? And so, so I feel blessed that I was able to get out. But once I got out, and I felt really compelled to be part of the solution and help other people to see their options available to them, to educate people about the prevalence of this issue. I had so many friends coming to me for help. It was amazing at that time. I was thinking, oh, this is ridiculous. Somebody's got to do something about this. And so I was, I listened to the news, and every night there'd be another story about some man who'd done something. And at the time, I was going through it. The Sacramento Bee was running a weekly article on domestic violence. Wow. And they had these live, up-to-date stories. And so that really helped me to get really ingrained. I decided to do something. I went and took the 64-hour training to learn more about it. And there's where I really gained confidence and knew how prevalent this issue was, that we could do something about it. And so I began working in the community locally in Sacramento and Roseville. And I got to know all the players, all of the local agencies down there. And I did men's programming, I did children's programming and youth programming. And it was mostly focused on the African American community and mostly focused on the faith community, right? As I continued to work at HP, they began to have their sputter and starts. And I decided that I wanted to work in something I had more passion about. So I looked in the paper one day, not in the paper, I went to the first networking meeting where I had decided, okay, I'm gonna make this shift to nonprofit. And this is the first time I'm really gonna speak publicly about it. And there happened to be a person there from this area. And she said, did you hear about the job opening at DVSAC? And I said, no, I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't heard of it. And I went in, there it was. And I looked at it, and it was really pretty good skills match. Because the executive director job is broad. You have to have financial management. I had that because I had an MBA. I got an MBA. I was fortunate to have an MBA. And I worked at HP as a project manager, a business ops manager, a financial analyst. So I had the business piece of it.
Yeah.
This piece was the part I didn't have, you know, the media piece, meeting with the media and that
Sure.
kind of thing. Just a little bit experience there. But working with people, managing projects, I had that. And so I applied, and I was really grateful to get an opportunity to work in my passion.
It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
in a way, it's too bad so many people get turned on to their passion because of a crisis,
Yeah,
like you
that's
had.
true. Mhm.
And at the same time, thank goodness that they did,
Yeah.
because they make a difference. They make a
Yeah.
huge difference.
Yeah.
I was wondering what it was like for you to move from profit to nonprofit. How was that shift for you?
It was huge.
I
It was a
would think
big
so.
shift. You know, I had to take a pay cut,
Yeah.
and I just calculated the cost and figured it would be worth it. You know, because
Yeah,
I'd get a
yeah.
chance to work at something that was really meaningful to me.
Yeah.
So I was really grateful for the opportunity to do it. I was really kind of worried that they wouldn't do it because I'm not, as the executive director, you're the face of the community.
Sure.
You're face of the organization to the community. And I know my face is black.
So that has been noticed.
And I knew the community. And so I was really surprised that they would do it. They would take that leap of faith,
Yes,
right?
thank goodness.
And so it was great, a great opportunity, and it's been very welcoming. The community's been very welcoming, and I have not had one issue. And there's plenty of work to do. There's a lot of work to do with regard to domestic violence, with regard to DVSAC. A lot of work to do, but got a great team of ladies working on this with me. Great team of volunteers. We have more volunteers than we have employees.
Wow.
And
And that's another whole world. I mean, it's one thing to be managing employees. It's another thing to be managing volunteers. So that's a little different angle on it as well.
And it is a different culture.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, I have a corporate background, but I also have an IT background. And it's a different culture to go from there to social services.
Yeah.
And, you know, my work is full of women, strong views. Well, they don't necessarily have a good view of corporate America, let alone IT. So it was a bit of a shift for both of us, all of us, as I shifted management styles for social services. So they hung in there with me, though.
Well, and as well they should. I mean, you bring to the party much more than one usually can find for a nonprofit experience like you have.
Thank you.
And I have to, you know, I laugh, I call you and Ernest the DV power couple. So why don't you say a little bit about what your husband is doing in this work?
Yeah, so Ernest, my husband, also, we met, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago. But at the time, he was working at HP in IT as well. But we met and fell in love, and then he came to work in this field. He had been around this field through working with me, and so he was there when I built my ministry and helped us do our purpose statement and that type of thing. So he'd been around the field a long time. He knew a lot about it just from osmosis. Been through many domestic violence awareness month campaigns through my church, and so he became familiar with it. But at some point we had a business day. We got married and we had a business together. And the business wasn't making enough money. It was during the economy. And he'd always said, at one time he helped me put on a men's conference. And he said, I said, babe, would you just come and take notes? I just need somebody to take notes. And because I can't both run the meeting and take good notes. He said, okay, but that's all I'm doing. I'm just taking notes. So he comes to the meeting. He takes notes for me. And, you know, it helps me get together that it's going well. We've got like 10 community groups involved. It's a large men's conference focused on black men and boys and any violence against women. And we bring in Tony Porter from the East Coast, very powerful speaker.
Oh, yes, he is.
And so Ernest helped with all that. Well, the day of, one of our speakers didn't show up. So Ernest has to take more of a role, right?
He got drafted?
He got drafted, and he stepped up to the plate. But in doing that, all the other players, you know, the executive director of Weave got to see him. Well, they had been at meetings with him already. they got to see him, his skill set, and what he was doing. Well, later on, when our business wasn't doing so well and he needed a part-time job, I met lunch with her one day, and she said, how's Ernest doing? I'm like, oh, he's doing fine. And she said, I need a part-time person. I said, what are you looking for? And you know, it was just his skill set.
And she said
perfectly.
Ernest.
Yeah, she did not. She did not. She told me what she was looking for.
Yeah.
I said, that sounds perfect for Ernest. She said, that does sound perfect for Ernest. So,
Yeah.
and he got drafted into the movement. And so then he went on to lead their Coaching Boys to Men program. He worked with coaches in high schools in Sacramento. I think he trained over 1,300 students, 300 through 300 coaches, and it was a very successful program.
Wow.
He was part of the, at that time they were testing that program to make sure it was evidence-based, so they were keeping a lot of statistics, and they needed somebody to organize that data and be very methodical about administering it, and of course that fit him to a T, being an engineer, so, and being a good communicator. So he did all those things, and he was part of the research paper that went out on it.
Wow.
He's an author now, you know.
Wow.
And that he had such success with the program, doors just started opening. So here I was, I'd been in the movement for, I don't know, 9, 10 years, working away in the fields. Ernest walks in, he's in for like a year. He's getting invited to the Capitol to speak, you know, he's invited here, he's on the stage. I'm like, oh, right. Well, it's like the world was waiting for a man to walk in, right?
Absolutely.
The world was waiting for a man to walk in and carry that message. And so he basked in that glory for a while. He wore it for about 2 years. But then, you know, we had real bills, so he had to get a real job.
So he does that too.
Yeah, he does that too.
Yeah, yeah.
So now he is back to work at Dell, but he's still doing Coaching Boys to Men up here in Grass Valley for me.
Yes, yes.
So that's very cool. Jeff Dellis at the high school is at NU, has taken on Coaching Boys to Men. And so that's been a first time this year, so that's
well, I think it's the thing that's so delightful for me is that it's unique to find a couple who've really taken this on together, and it's fabulous. I wanted to say also, we started out by saying why this is important for people to know. I think it's important for everyone to understand what is going on college campuses right now.
Oh my goodness, yes.
What's going on in the military right now, what's going on in military schools, not to mention the wives of football players and others. So this conversation is so critical to the culture itself. And so, and I'm seeing more and more, as we talked earlier, the absolute necessity for the good men to stand up with us. It is really critical.
A lot of us that have been doing this work for a long time realize that that's so important, and that you know, we really need that to happen for us to make real advances, because men need to come off the sidelines.
Absolutely.
They exist in this world. They're bystanders to this violence, right?
Yes.
They're impacted by it. They have wives, daughters, sisters.
Absolutely.
And so they just need to be given tools to deal with it, right? They may not know what to do. One of the things that men can do is they can stop co-signing by being silent. They need to speak up, right?
Absolutely.
They need to speak up and say, "Man, that's not okay. That's not not cool."
Yeah, that is offensive to me as well.
That's offensive to me.
Yeah. You told a great story the other day. We were talking about the fact that conscious or unconscious, there is this how would you call it, a veil of fear for women when they go out at night. You know, we don't think about it, but we know. I was amazed once, like 10 years ago, we asked at a community meeting a group of women, what's your biggest issue here in our county, our sweet little safe county? They said safety, and I was taken aback, and that was a long time ago before we were talking about all of this and violence, et cetera. And so when I was talking to you about it the other day, you were telling about an experience you had in a workshop. I'd love for you to share that, because I think it's part of what we have to teach the men as well.
Right. I mean, I think this was a workshop I attended. It was a multicultural workshop at HP, and they had the women and men sit in the circle with their backs to each other, and they would ask a question. For example, how many of you have to look How many of you look under your car as you approach your car when you're done shopping at the end? All the women raise their hand. I raise. And then they say to, how many of you make sure that you have your keys in your hand before you leave the store that you're going out at night? They raise their hand. How many of make sure that you leave a trail of where you're going at night if you go out without a partner? And the women raise their hand. The men don't raise their hand for anything, right? Right. So, and they ask just like 4 or 5 or 6 questions, but it was the men were shocked that women have to think through all that, right? They were not even aware because it's not their reality.
No,
they don't have to think like that. But being a woman in this country, we have become, you know, that's how we were raised, and it's part of being a woman that we have to think about these safety issues.
That's right.
And so it's important for our men to become more aware.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That this is not a safe place for us. It's become an unsafe place for us. I'm thinking about our flyer. Marilyn and I are participating in 1 Billion Rising coming up shortly here. In February, on February 15th, right here in
14th.
On February 14th, on Valentine's Day, right here. But as we were organizing for this flyer, we had people who really wanted to broaden the scope. They said, our flyer said, speak out, rise up and demand an end to violence against women. And they had this big conversation going back and forth all the time that, why do we have to say women? Why can't we say against people? Why can't it be, let's include boys, let's include children, we can include all those things.
Oh, yes.
We want the world to be free of violence. But that is not the issue. The issue is that this has become an unsafe place for women.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
That is the
well
issue.
Said. Well
so
said.
we took it off the flyer just to have harmony so we could move forward. But the issue is that it's an unsafe world for us.
Yeah.
If it were an unsafe place for men, something would be done about it. If it were an unsafe place for children, something will be done about it.
Not necessarily. I mean, that's another issue. It's not being done enough about it.
Yes, but we have Megans, we have these things that go out on the internet, on the highway,
alerts and,
Amber Alerts.
Yeah.
I mean, we are doing things to protect our children.
That's true.
It's an urgent thing.
Yeah.
Every night you turn on the news, some other woman is missing. We don't put out Amber Alerts for her, right? No. I mean, it is shocking the value that we place on women in this society, when you think about it. It has to do with the value, the value that our society places on us.
Absolutely.
Right? It has to do with values. And it's shocking and unsettling, because women give birth to this world, right?
Absolutely.
They give birth to, everybody here has a mom, right? And they have, so.
Guaranteed.
So it's, I don't know, don't get me started.
I can get you started. We'll both dance with that. No, I would go even further and say, Mother Earth herself has been violated so deeply. So really, it is the feminine itself that is not being respected and held as with the respect and importance that is deserved, and the equality that's deserved between all of us. So yes, you and I have been on the same page for quite a while. But I do think that, as I said, I think if women think, well, this doesn't really hit home for me, if they've got a daughter or a niece or anyone going to college, they better be thinking about it. If they know anyone that's in the service. And then the other piece you sort of touched on in a way, and that is that when young women or women report this, they're not always taken seriously.
Yeah.
They become the victims again.
That's right.
And being accused, and their lifestyle is examined. And I'm sure there's some women that take advantage of that, but it is a very small percentage.
It is a very small
when you consider the
yes.
number of people who are so incredibly wounded by this.
I hate to get that statistic wrong, but I think it's something like, I had to look it up because of the Bill Cosby thing and the University of, one of the universities.
Was it Pennsylvania?
No, it was,
okay.
I can't think of it now. but they recently had a false report. And it's a very small percentage. I think it's like 95% of all rapes are true, right? There's still 5% that may false report. But that's still a very small number, right? So most of the time we can believe those cases. The problem is that because of the victim blaming that goes on, they go unreported.
That's right. That's right.
Right, they go unreported. If you're a young girl and you're out drinking with your friends and something happens to you, you don't want to go home and tell your parents.
No. And if they find out, you'll be held responsible because you were drinking.
That's right. You were drinking and you were not where you're supposed to be. So, those cases, our sexual assault cases, go largely unreported. They did a study of college students. I think it came out in 2000. And only they asked them about, assaults that had happened prior to them in the past. And only 5% of them had been reported. So the sexual assault part of this equation is highly unreported.
So our statistics are all a little...
They're all off.
Very off.
They're very off. It goes on at a very, on college campuses in particular, it's really sad. They target the young freshmen as they come in.
Of course they do.
And what they find in studying that environment is that there are only a few perpetrators, but because no one is holding them accountable, they reoffend and reoffend. Those few are responsible for most of the sexual
Well, that's what I said
assault on
earlier.
campus,
It feels to me like it's really a small percentage of men that do this.
It
but
is.
it's the good men who, if they're not speaking up, will allow that to continue.
Yes.
And of course, then we blame all men, which is not
It's
fair
not the
either.
case. It's
Yeah,
just a
yeah.
few. It's just
Yeah.
a few bad guys.
Yeah, that's
but they
right,
get all
that's
the
right.
press.
Right.
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 They
Well,
all
you
the
get
press,
schools
yeah.
protecting and athletics protecting
Sure.
the young men who are engaged in this, and they feel that's part of their the benefit, I guess, of being football players or whatever they're doing.
What I like about the Coaching Boys and Men program,
Yes.
and we had a success story come up recently, and I'll have to be careful about this, but the Coaching Boys and Men program is a program where the coaches take 15 minutes in each practice with their team.
Yeah.
And they're giving a script to different scenarios: respect for women, using your strength for good, cat calls, different things to go over with them. And so on the course, coaches are very influential in young men's lives. And athletes are influential on campus. So this is the whole premise of this program. And we had a success story here recently where one of the guys in campus had posted something untrue with regard to a young lady on another team, on another campus, giving good head, all this stuff. And she was just, really upset about it and went and told her a friend. And the friend then got an adult involved, a coach involved. And the coach, I don't know whether he picked the guys or the guys self-elected, but they decided, 3 of them, to go and use the skills they learned from coaching boys to men and approach the young people who had done this.
Wow.
So it's peer-to-peer correction, right?
Yes, absolutely.
It's not, and it was more effective because sometimes when girls do tell, they get that retaliation in social media as well.
By other girls as well.
Yes, by other girls, right?
Yeah.
And so, so I think that's kind of what we hope to see.
And I bet those boys felt really good about moving in and taking that position.
Yeah, it builds leadership in them.
It does. And last year, I think the thing that really impacted me in last year's program, this is our 3rd year for the 1 Billion Rising. And last year, one of the women stood and talked. She's in her 60s, beautiful, wonderful, successful woman in her life. And she talked in a way that I was watching the audience, and it was so amazing to me. I mean, women were crying, men. This is a woman who had been abused since childhood by her father. and had been denied by family members that he couldn't have done anything like that. And so she told the story, and just watching these faces, and the men were uncomfortable. Some of them looked like deer in the headlight, others were like shocked. First of all, she didn't look like a rape victim. She didn't look like someone was hanging out at the bar.
Right.
And she had taken 62 years of her life to process what had happened to her.
Right.
And that was so powerful. And in listening to her, that's what I really realized and saw, this invisible blanket that women carry with them around safety. And you could just almost see it. People could just identify with what she had gone through and why they had to be careful, because if it hasn't happened to you, it happened to someone you know.
That's
so
true.
Everyone has to take the precautions necessary. And I again, you know, this is a turnaround year, I think, in many ways. I think more and more men are going to stand up because they are beginning to come out now and say, good grief, it is something I need to address. And I think that's really important.
That is very important.
And we should talk about how to address it with 1 Billion Rising, too.
Nice.
So let's give some of the details to that. You want to say a little bit about the program and where it came from, its origins?
Yeah, 1 Billion Rising is, I'll let you talk about the origin. Eve Ensler has, is the brainchild, her brainchild. And why don't you say a little bit about that, and I'll talk about the local celebration.
Okay, Eve Ensler, some of you may have heard of before. She is, a speaker, an author, an activist, and a playwright. She's created something called Vagina Monologues, which you may have heard of, and it's an extremely powerful, powerful play. And this was her brainchild. She came up with it, 3 years ago, probably?
3 years ago, on the 15th anniversary of Vagina Monologues.
Okay.
To celebrate.
And what she did was she basically said, given that women, at least 1 billion women around the world, are violated and go through this, that it was time for 1 billion to rise. And this is a program now, an event that occurs all over the world. It is an international event, and it is so cool. If you go online to 1billionrising.com, I think it is, to see the videos of women dancing, and men and women dancing in Africa and everywhere across the planet, and speaking to how this has it's almost like a statement of celebration that the end of violence is here.
Yeah.
It's like seeing what we know we want to have happen and celebrating it right now. And so ours has been great. I think the first year we had, 1,000 families, men, women, children dancing down the street. And last year, that was in Grass Valley, and last year it was in Nevada City. We had less, but I think there we have some photographs on the screen. It is engaging, it's community-oriented, and it's friendly.
So what I wanted to say about it is...
There we are.
What I wanted to say about 1 Billion Rising is that it is a global celebration.
Absolutely.
And our local, it's a local expression of a global celebration. But it was the first time that a billion people would rise up for any reason.
Really?
Right?
Really.
At the same, on the same day?
Same day, yeah.
207 countries participated. It was amazing to be part of this, right? It felt amazing. It was electric. I was so happy to be part of it.
Yes, yes.
And when we turned the corner, we didn't know who would show up. We put out the word, and we turned the corner. There was 1,000 people waiting in the Safeway parking lot. We were like, wow, we have started something here. We were so excited. That was such a huge thing. We had a great program. And then the second year, Marilyn joined our ranks in 2014, and it was in Nevada City. And the theme that year was justice. And so we rose up on the courthouse steps. And that was amazing as well. We had a lot of legal officials join us there. The city attorney
mayor, and the attorney, the city
mayor,
attorney,
and the DA joined us and told his own story of domestic violence in his family, and so it was huge. I mean, it was great. And this year, it's on President's Day weekend. We don't know how that's going to impact the numbers, but we hope it impacts it in a good way. We hope that people bring their families, that they bring their children. that they come out, and because this is how we tell our kids about what's going to happen, right? What's going on. It's family friendly. We don't use any cursing. We're not, it's more of a celebration.
It's lean and clean.
It's lean and clean. It's only an hour program. We march up the street. We learn the dance. The dance is to Break the Chain, which is also out on the website, and it's a fun dance. The lyrics are very powerful.
It's choreographed, so you can learn how to do the dance.
We do a flash mob. We all do it together.
Right.
It's so fun on the website, like you were saying, to see everybody doing that dance across the world, right? So when you go to the website, you see people rising across the world. You see people in India rising, in Africa rising, and people in Tehran rising with their faces covered in a room, right? Because faces can't be seen,
and
but
they can't be outside. Yeah, they're rising,
even though they're rising in their rooms together. So it's very powerful.
It's a very, very powerful event. And this year, we're going to be meeting at 2 o'clock, I think, is it? Or 1 o'clock. I got to look at the 1 o'clock in the Safeway parking lot in Grass Valley. And then we're going to be dancing our way all the way to the Holiday Inn, where we will have a program that will start at 2, from 2 to 3, I think it is, 2 to 3. We'll have a program there. And here's the really great, I think, coup de pas, is that we're going to have a men's panel speaking to the issue. And my friend here has lined up some really wonderful people and coaches, and they're going to talk about how they're working with the young boys as well. And so I think it's exciting, and it's definitely a community, a way of the community coming together to support an issue that underlies so much else in our culture.
We invite you to join us. We invite your organizations to join us. There are tables available.
That's right. Networking tables?
Yeah, we're selling tables, so you can have a presence there and come out and join us and learn the dance.
We should give you a phone number if I can find it here. It's, I think it's Nancy's phone number, if I can find it.
But let's give them the website. The website is 1billionrising.nevadacounty.org.
That's where to go, because Nancy's phone number is on that one and not on this flyer. But if you're interested in having a table there, please get a hold of us. And
also, DVSAC is the fiscal agent, so your checks can be made payable there. You can don't call the crisis line. Call us at 272-2046 to reserve your table if you like.
Yes.
Yes. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that we have a community event coming up called the Daddy-Daughter Dance. It's become a community favorite, and we host about 500 people last year. It is a fantastic event. The little girls come dressed to the nines. They're with their dads. They're so proud, and those dads party. Now, they don't party with us like that, but somehow when the little girls ask them to dance, they just get out there. They got hands in the air. They're partying.
That's great.
Tails off, and so it's a fun event. And in this way, we get to see healthy relationships, and also Dad's on his best behavior. He's opening doors. He's pulling out the seat. He's teaching his girls what it's like to be treated well. And so we have a lot of fun. Where's it going to be? It's going to be at the Vets Hall the Friday, February 6th. Tickets are available now online at www.dvsac.org or call us at 272-2046. Only $36 per couple. We keep that ticket price reasonable. $10 for an additional princess if you've got more than one child. And it's a fun time. The theme this year is Under the Sea.
Great.
And we are
That's going to be fun.
We're accepting all mermaid applications in case we have any mermaids out there that want to be there that night. But it will be fun.
Great.
We have a great time, and we just invite the community to come out and support us.
I want to say this about Gayle, too. Given the work you do, your attitude and your upbeatness, shall we say, is such a joy. And I know it brings great comfort to the women that you work with, because it doesn't feel like, oh, this is heavy, and it is heavy, but you hold it in a way that they can feel the healing beginning and the acceptance of what has occurred.
I really think there's hope. You know, I mean, I couldn't be this way if I didn't think we could really do something about this. I don't think it's rocket science. I think we can figure this out. My theme for 1 Billion Rising, my mantra for 1 Billion Rising this year is, hell no, no more.
That's it.
Not here.
Good.
That's all we had to say. What do you need? What else do we need? Just We're not going to accept it here in Grass Valley.
What a great way to close the program. We are not accepting it anywhere.
We don't accept it here, but definitely not here.
Yeah, definitely not here. Not while Gayle's around. Well, thank you for joining us today. Again, I hope you'll share this with the men that you love or that love you in your life to hear a different side of things from a different perspective. So we will be back again next month, and I think we have a very interesting show. I'm not ready to announce it yet, but it's going to be very, very interesting. So thank you very much for joining us. I am